Hey guys, welcome back. We are here together for week two here in Together What If of our series that we're doing called Bible Stories for Grown-Ups. And last week, you guys looked at the compelling story of Jesus walking on the water. And this week, we're looking at a unique story. It is the only story that is in all four Gospels, and it is where Jesus feeds the 5,000. And we have some special guests who are going to tell us the story.
All right, so today we have Gracie Kate and Lucy Lecture and Charlie Sanger, and they are going to tell us about the time Jesus fed 5,000 people. Charlie, why don't you start us off? Where was this happening?
They were walking and they're talking about Jesus and God. And then they're starting to get hungry.
Oh, they started to get hungry. So, Lucy, what did they do when they started to get hungry? Did they run to McDonald's?
No.
No?
They get some bread and fish.
They had some bread and some fish. Good. Gracie, do you remember how many bread and how many fish?
5 bread and 2 fish.
Oh, wow. Now, were there just a few people there, or were there a whole lot of people there?
There's a lot of people.
A lot of people there. So, like 4 people, is that a lot?
No, like hundreds.
Hundreds? Did you know the Bible actually says there were 5,000 people there that day? Charlie, how many is 5,000 people?
Like 100 plus this church, plus my neighborhood, plus my house, plus everything.
That's a lot of people. And how much bread did they have?
5.
5 pieces. And how many
2.
fish, Lucy?
2.
So is that going to feed everybody?
No. Yes.
No. Oh, Charlie says it will. How's it going to feed everybody, Charlie?
Because Jesus blessed it and had more food.
He blessed it. And then what happened when he broke the bread in half?
Made more.
It made more bread. Who passed out all the bread and fish, Grace Kate?
The disciples?
You're right, the disciples did. Lucy, did they have enough for everybody or did they run out?
I have enough for everybody.
Everybody. And that was all? They didn't have any leftovers?
Yesterday?
They had leftovers? How did just a few pieces?
No, lots of leftovers.
And who was it that blessed the bread?
Jesus.
Jesus. What did Jesus get for the people?
Food.
Food. He took care of them, didn't he? Will Jesus take care of you? Will Jesus take care of you, Charlie? How about you, Lucy? Is Jesus going to take care of you?
Yes.
Yes. And you, Gracie Kate, is Jesus going to take care of you? Yeah.
All right, so I'm here today at Together What If, feeding of the 5,000. This is Pastor Joshua Hudson, and we have Caroline Sanger with us. And Caroline, tell us what you do day in and day out.
Yeah, so I am the assistant director of the children's ministry here at GFUMC. So I spend a lot of time prepping all that fun curriculum that we do with our kids, all the lessons, the Bible school stuff, all the fun things your kids get to do.
Yeah, and so you are, we're kind of unique here because you're sort of over the day-to-day operations of our kid ministry, and Mary Lana Purdue is over the weekday preschool, but those are united because y'all work together.
Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
Okay.
Sometimes I'll teach chapel in the preschool, and I do a lot of stuff going down there, but we collaborate a lot between the two, and it's united.
Yeah, and we usually have this time in all our worship services where we have a children's moment, and you sometimes are leading those, and you do such a great job with them. And so we were just curious today, when it comes to making the Bible come alive for our youngest Christ followers, how do you do that?
Whew, it is fun. So a lot of times when we look at those Bible stories that we're going to teach, we want to focus more on that big picture.
Okay.
A lot of the stories we see have lots of names or how people are related and small details. And when we bring those into our stories, our kids, we lose them. They're caught on something, a silly name or something.
Yeah.
So we want to get that big story, and then from there we focus on maybe what we want them to learn. Yeah. And the overarching theme is always to teach them to know a compassionate, loving Jesus that they can trust in and they can have faith in.
So you've got a main goal. You want them to know how Jesus features in the story.
Yep.
And you want them to see him as what did you say?
Compassionate, loving, someone they can trust and fully have faith in.
I gotcha. And so I think I love this today because I think of you sort of like a Bible scholar.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, Joshua, you can go deep. I love it. So when you're looking at a story, like you're trying to prepare to teach adults, you're teaching children, how do you take the content, like let's say the content of the feeding of the 5,000 and make it compelling and deep and yet understandable?
Well, my answer right off the bat is not going to be like this deep theologian thing. It's really an answer that I give time and time again when it comes to, well, where did you learn to preach or write sermons? And I really learned it in kids ministry. My first job in the church was as a children's pastor, and I learned in preparation even for adults later on that if I could break a Bible story down to the level that a second or third grader, that my son Jack, he's in third grade now, if I can present something in such a way that they can present it back to me, then that's the goal. And so, in all honesty, when I'm preparing something like the story of Jesus feeding 5,000, I mean, no offense to our adults out there, but I am thinking about that second or third grader. And that, I was kind of thinking about, what is the things that get on the cutting floor that gets cut out? Because, part of sermon preparation is just like getting all this incredible, neat stuff. Yeah. Other people's perspectives, other, ways of telling it, video clips, all this stuff, but not all of it can make it in a 15-minute sermon, which stinks. Because I came out of a tradition where sometimes people preach for an hour and a half, so you can get it all in there.
Oh, yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. but no, seriously, like working it down, whittling it down, getting it to the point where the main point can be given back to you. I think that's ultimately the goal. And so as I was thinking about this story of Jesus feeding the 5,000, I think for me, the main point, especially for John, is that Jesus is the bread of life. And so for John...
Okay, so when you're looking at it from John's perspective, he has a little bit of a different take on it than the first three Gospels.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. And I think even when we think about what makes the cut, what gets cut out, that may sound crude to someone who's listening who maybe thinks, how dare you?
Yeah.
How dare you omit something from the story? But we just mentioned how John has a certain take. In reality, the Gospels, all four Gospels, are doing the exact same thing. They're all telling the story of Jesus, but they all have different perspectives. They all have different things that they are trying to articulate. It's not that one is arguing with the other one, but perhaps Matthew may have more emphasis on this, and for instance, all throughout the Gospel of Mark, which we think is the earliest gospel, we've looked at it a lot at Easter. Jesus is misunderstood. Even the disciples don't understand him. He's teaching this stuff, and Mark tells us over and over again they didn't understand it. But Matthew,
if you have ears, hear, and they don't hear.
But for Matthew, Jesus is like the teacher of the law par excellence. Like, he is the best teacher. Yeah. People are just walking away marveling. So,
that's so true.
So it's
like our Sermon on the Mount is like, this man speaks with authority.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like we're telling the same story of Jesus, but Mark has this like real secret motif is what they call it. And Matthew wants you to know that Jesus was the teacher of the law, like the best teacher of the law.
He trumps all other teachers.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Exactly. And so yeah, things are the same, but things are different. And what makes our story so unique is it is the one constant in all four Gospels. Now, why that is, I'm not sure, but it is like this miracle is the one miracle that shows up in all four Gospels.
So I'm going to go to you now. Okay. So I want you to pretend I'm a second grader because that's about where we are. And if you were teaching this story, Caroline, you are such a great teacher. So how would you tell me the story real quick?
Okay. So we would basically start with Jesus was a great teacher, like we were just talking. And he had so many followers who just wanted to hear him teach and wanted to hear him learn from him. And a group gathered, and they were so enthralled with what he was teaching, and they were so excited that they stayed and they listened, and people got, and at this point, I'd be like, what happens when you listen to something and you're doing something, you're having so much fun? They're like, we get hungry.
Yeah.
Yes, we get hungry. And they looked around and no one had any food. And Jesus told his disciples, go out and see if there's any food. And they found a boy with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. And they brought it back and they said, here, Jesus, this is what we've got, but I don't think this is gonna cut it. And at that point, Jesus said, trust me, I've got this. We talked to them a little bit in their language. Yeah. And he blessed the bread and he blessed the fish, and they took it out. Yeah. And amazingly, everyone was able to eat. And not only that, they had enough for leftovers.
They had enough for leftovers.
Yep, they had so much food. And we just make it really simple.
So abundant. And so so they come away with that, with like, man, Jesus is cool. He doesn't just teach, but he feeds you and he gives you more than you need.
Absolutely.
So how does that translate to the way that you would teach it in like what we call big church or the adult church or whatever?
And I love how Caroline said that, because that is the same message, right?
Okay.
The message that I want them to take is the same, is that Jesus is is the source of abundance. Some of the things that you look at as you're reading and you're thinking about this is some of the context that we get in John that becomes significant is that Jesus, it says that he asked the question to Philip, how are we going to feed these people? To test him. He's like, and so Jesus is about to do something. And something interesting too is that John doesn't call this a miracle. John calls miracles signs. In John. So it's not even,
which tells me that a sign is pointing to something.
Else.
Okay.
And so in John's framework, what his story differs too is John has Jesus give out the food. So the disciples don't give it out. So the proximity to Jesus is the connecting point for the abundance. So Jesus literally becomes the source of abundance. And then John goes on to say the next day, people came to that same spot looking for the man that gives bread. He's not there. They find Jesus. Jesus says, you guys have come for food because you're hungry. And ultimately, he comes to the point of saying, I am the bread of life. And so,
is this where he switches it up and he preaches the sermon and a lot of them leave? Is that in this gospel?
It might be. I'm not completely sure, but I know where he says,
then he
unless
looks
you
at
eat
Peter.
my body.
Yeah. Because this is one of my favorite things when he looks at Peter and go, you leaving too?
And if it's not in John, it should be.
But I feel like that's where like Peter is like, no, you have the words of eternal life.
Yeah.
If it's not, it should be, because it's like, so there'll probably be comments below. I hope there's comments like, oh, y'all should know this. You're on staff at a church. But
And so what so essentially I'm just trying to take the exact same message and try to, take some of the details that really we could really, if all they walked away with was that's still the most important thing, is that Jesus is our source of abundance. But John is doing such a creative way, in a very, John way of connecting the dots for us and letting us see that Jesus is, like, the sign is pointing to Jesus being the provider, the ultimate provider. And John's got all kinds of like unique things. Like he talks about how they sat down in a field that was full of grass. And so commentators are always like, this is pointing to where Jesus says he's the good shepherd in chapter 10.
Because of the grass. There's not a lot of grass there, right?
Yeah. And it's just like, those little details are great for a sermon, but really maybe adults don't want to hear this, but the message is the same. And maybe we should think about that when, sometimes we think about things in Scripture that would not be appropriate to tell a kid.
Yeah.
And we focus in on that thing. And maybe sometimes we even build our arguments on these types of details. And I almost wonder, like, if there's not like this message that a second or third grader can get whenever we're thinking about the point of a story in the Bible, then maybe we as adults are the ones that have gotten derailed and missed the point. Because I think it was Jesus who said, unless you receive the kingdom as a little child. Yeah. So I don't know. That's why I was excited about this series, bringing in Caroline and Marilina, because I think they've kind of got their finger on the pulse, and sometimes we get way off course.
That's a great point, because circling back to what you and Marilina do, and with that whole team of volunteers, I get to serve with you guys, and and I'm a little bit older now, so my kids are moving on, and I get to come back and see God in each one of these children. And I really feel like that's how you all approach it. Like each one is sacred and special and created. Not every kid up there is going to be an early adopter to whatever you're doing. I've been watching you guys prepare for your big preschool presentations, and there's like always like 5 of them who just won't sing.
No, they are not about
They're
it.
not going to sing it, you know, and mom and dad can let that bother them, or they can say, that's God working out in my kid. My kid is not that person, but when they're an adult, they might be the studious one. They might be the one who says, hey, this is the calm way to do it. Who knows how? That's what I love about children's ministry here, is that the potential of what God is going to work.
Yeah, and that's one thing we try to teach in a lot of our lessons. We try to relate it back to their lives. We talk about, how would you have felt at this sermon? How would you have felt if there was bread and fish? What would you have done? And then we talk about the disciples and not having faith, maybe not believing. Have you ever had a difficult moment where you were a little afraid, you doubted something? And we relate it back and we talk about what they could do in those situations, because they're going to have situations like that in their lives. And they can look back at what they learned at church and take that out into their lives and be prepared to handle it.
And it's okay for them to feel that way.
Absolutely.
And you don't say, oh no, God, you're more like God will be there with.
Absolutely.
See, what, that's good.
Joshua
and I sort of grew up in sort of the same faith tradition. We're like, whoa, what would life have been like if we had.
and you know, ironically enough, if Jennifer asked me, what are you preaching? And I just start rambling off, she's like, no. How's it relatable? Like, that's all she cares about. Like, what story are you going to tell to relate it back? So, like, once again, there's that similarity. All right, I had one thing I wanted to ask them to ask Carolina English, and we talked about this. So, what is the craziest thing that a kid has asked?
Oh, gosh.
All right, we're going to end on this.
Yeah, this is our end right here.
A common theme in our children's ministry is that they really love the story of Jesus in the temple, and they love the flipping tables.
Oh, Jimmy does too.
That you ask any kid downstairs, and they hone it. We're gonna flip tables like Jesus. I'm like, guys.
I love this time that we've had together today. And thank you for joining us for Together What If. If you want to support Together What If, you can like and share this. We need you to do that. And you can also give at gfumc.com. Next week, we're back with week 3, and we're going to talk about friends bringing a man up on a roof to see Jesus. And we'll see you next week. But be sure to stay tuned for Eric and Nick singing Consider the Ravens.
I've got bills to pay, tax man on my tail. Just keep praying that the check's in the mail. There are times it seems that everything's lost, and I'm moaning, I'm tossed, and I see between the river and the ravens I'm fed, between oblivion and places I'm led. So Father, give me faith, providence and grace. Between the river and the ravens I'm fed. Sweet deliverer, you lift up my head and lead me in your way. I've grown sick and tired of trying to stand still. Time to let the wind blow me where it will. Throw myself into the will of the way. I can never be great till I'm free. Between the river and the ravens I'm fed, between oblivion and places I'm led. So Father, give me faith, providence and grace. Between the river and the ravens I'm fed. of the shadow of death. Evil's all around, it's coming from the right and the left. Trust that I